This video is going to cover the MIS Module 7 lecture. Module 7, or Chapter 7, is titled A Connected World, and a broad overview is that we're going to be looking at the Internet, navigating around the Internet, services on the Internet, some web applications, intranet versus extranet, and then we'll be also looking at future trends. So by now you should have downloaded your notes and gotten them ready in order to take notes either during the lecture and or while you are reading through the textbook. You could also utilize the PowerPoints for this particular section. Let's see if I can find them here. And so I'll be using a little bit of both as we go through the lecture, but mostly I'll be using the textbook. A couple of pointers just when you're using the textbook. Remember that you can use this speech button here. And so if you are a more auditory learner, you could actually just play the text while you take notes over the sections. Another thing is that it also has, you can add bookmarks and you can add highlights and stuff. And so if you take a look at your note sheet, so the very first thing there is what is the definition of the Internet? And my shortcut definition of it is highlighted here, and that is the Internet is a network of networks. And so it was developed in the late 1960s here as part of a backbone for, or a part of a communication system for the National Science Foundation. And so this ARPANET is how the Internet started, and it connected several universities. The Internet backbone is a foundation of the networks linked with fiber optic cables, and it supports what we call a very high bandwidth. This gives kind of an example of just how the networks might be connected and some of the original networks that were developed. That shows IBM's backbone at a certain particular time. As you are working through things on the Internet, it's going to include hypermedia, and hypermedia includes, and it's actually right here evident in this particular example, because if I click on hypermedia, that's hypermedia. It's when you have links that are embedded within documents, and those links can lead you to other things, and they reference, they could be audio, text, images, videos, etc. And so hypertext is just one example of hypermedia. Hypertext is when you have embedded references in that particular context. And so you guys are all kind of familiar with that. There is some interesting reading here. If you're interested in a little bit in the timeline or the background, you can look at that. The domain name system is something that they are going to expect you to be a little bit familiar with. And so what happens on the Internet is that we have to have a way to identify every single web page, every single file, every single computer, etc. And so what happens on the Internet is that the information is transferred from one network to another network by domain names that are converted to IP addresses. So like you could look up the IP address of your computer. This is an example of an IP address right here. So you may have seen some of these. For example, if you're connecting your printer sometimes to a computer, it actually has its own IP address, and so you might see some numbers like that pop up. When you connect with an IP address, they are hard to remember and hard to read. And so what we've done is created these uniform resource locators so it's easy for us to remember a website. For example, you guys should be familiar with dmac.edu. That's a website that you use frequently. The URL is what identifies a web page and an address of that web page on the Internet. Okay, and so right here that is highlighted. And so in this example here, www.csub.edu, which would be some other university because it's or educational institution because it ends in an edu. This is called a URL. Every domain name has a suffix indicating the top level domain. That's these last three letters. edu is a top level domain. Here are some other examples of top level domains. And so you're going to need to be able to recognize what a top level domain is. They're also going to want you to be able to recognize like the different parts of a URL, for example, here. And so when you are breaking apart a URL, if we take a look at the www.csub.edu, www stands for World Wide Web, CSUB stands for California State University at Bakersfield, and the edu is a suffix for the educational institution. So together, when you put csub.edu or like dmac.edu, it uniquely identifies that website on the web. The next part here, this little tilde and the H, Bengali, that represents a folder. That represents a location on this particular institution's network, so to speak. And then the last part here, the books.html, indicates a particular file. And so you're going to be responsible for knowing the different parts of this particular, not this particular URL, but of URLs. One thing I didn't mention back up here is that it used to be we were kind of limited on the top level domains. There used to be only 22 generic top level domains, but they opened them up, and now different companies can actually end or use a generic word at the end of their URL. There's corporate URLs, there's community URLs such as .Spanish or .Persian. There's geographic ones like .London or .Madrid. And so there's now a much larger pool of URLs that are available. And they're actually used quite a bit for marketing, because if you can put the name of your business within a URL, then that's going to help you with your marketing. Hypertext markup language is something that they want you to at least know that that is how a web page is created, and it defines the layout and the appearance of a web page. And some of you are taking classes right now that might be designing and using HTML. But that's how, how they get, for example, in this particular textbook, that all of the, some of the keywords here, or the hypertext language is highlighted in a particular color. You get the arrows on each side of the screen here. This is an interactive textbook, but some of that formatting is done through HTML. And that's called a hypertext markup language, but it manages the appearance and the layout of a web page. There are different types of internet connections, and so you're not going to really have to know the very specifics about each of these in terms of, like, I'm not going to ask you what is the download or upload speed of a symmetric DSL. What you should kind of just know generically is that when you see the word DSL, that is going to be, it stands for digital subscriber line. And again, you're not going to have to remember what exactly that is, but just know that it's a type of connection that is used over the internet. There's symmetric, asymmetric, and very high speed. Symmetric is basically deals with the upload and download speeds, and the upload and download speeds are basically the same. Asymmetric, the upload speeds are at a lower rate than the download speeds. And where that might be used is, for example, if you have like a service where, like, and I'm thinking like music. So like, if iTunes, like a artists will upload their music once to iTunes, but it might get downloaded, several thousand times. And so in that particular instance, you might want the download rate to be much faster than the upload rate. And then very high speed is just the download and upload rates are much faster. And you might hear people talk about the different like T1 lines or T3 lines, etc. Those are just categorizations about how fast a line in is. And I actually don't know what the fastest line is right now, but in this textbook, the T3 line would be the fastest line that is available. As we move on, there are tools on the internet, and they can be categorized into three different things: navigation tools, search engines, and directories. And so as you read through more of the textbook here, you'll get some of the details. But the navigation tools are basically what we use to browse and to get around the internet. There are several different browsers that are out there. You guys are familiar with several of them. And it also lists some here, such as Firefox, Google Chrome, Apple Safari, and Opera. Those are all navigation tools. They are all graphically oriented to also. Search engines follow a three-step process when they go through to like find what you want. There are several different search engines. There's Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, or Ask. I guess just as a little bit of an advertisement for DuckDuckGo, if you haven't heard of that, DuckDuckGo is a website that it doesn't like track your history and stuff. You know, like many times when you're out on some of these websites, they're going to track what you're doing, and then they're going to maybe have some pop-ups or some advertisements. DuckDuckGo does not do that. So if you want to basically search without being tracked or have all of those some of those annoying ads pop up because of what you've been, looking at in terms of like, sometimes when I go to purchase a book and I'm looking at several different books, all of a sudden it'll start suggesting some books for me. And if you don't want that to happen, you could use DuckDuckGo. So the search engines follow this three-step process where they do what we call crawl the web. And as they crawl the web, they are going out and just finding related links and or basically keywords. A lot of it is done through keywords. So when you crawl the web, they are looking for related things based upon keywords, and then they create indexes. So at server farms, the search engines use keywords to index data coming in from the web crawlers. And so the web crawlers go out and find the keywords, and then they index them. Each keyword has an index entry, and it's linked to all the web pages containing that keyword. Then when you enter a search item, the search engine will use those indexes that were created by the web crawlers in order to look up terms and find suggestions for you. So the search engines are going to allow retrieval of the information via keywords. And so as they are working, they will do that. In recent years, this is something new that I learned about. There's something called Graph Search by Facebook and Knowledge Graph by Google. And that's where they are basically kind of looking for not just keywords, but they're actually looking at photos and places and interests. So you could, if you turn this particular feature on, you could say, I want photos of all my friends who lived in Los Angeles, and you would get all those pictures. So it's actually a different way to get data back. Instead of a text-based data based on a keyword, it's a different way to get data back. So another thing is directories. And so directories organize information into categories. There are two kinds of directories on the web. The first is automated, and the other one is basically a manual. And the manual ones are basically kind of outdated right now. You really want automated directories because then your keywords and things that are in the directory will get updated automatically. But because of some of the newer technology and the way that indexing is done right now, directories are becoming less and less they're still used and they're still kind of critical, but there probably is less of an emphasis on them. All right, I'm kind of looking at my own notes here in the background to make sure I'm kind of mentioning everything that I want to. So next we're going to take a look at internet services. And when we look at internet services, this is, well, services are provided by the internet. And some of these I'm not going to go through in as much detail as others. But email is probably it says the most widely used services on the internet. And so you guys have to have one for class here. We communicate via email all the time. But there are different types of emails that are out there. Actually, let me go back because I went too fast. We need to just kind of look in here. So you have web-based email. That's one type of email that you might be used. And then you have a, let me find it here. Client-based email right here. You have web-based email and you have client-based email. So Gmail, for example, is your web-based email. Microsoft Outlook is an example of a client-based email. So basically, a client-based email program is going to be one that's run off like the DMAX server, for example, versus Gmail or your web-based mail that is accessible anywhere on the internet. And so you should kind of know the difference between those two. News groups and discussion groups. Just kind of read through these pages. I'm not going to read through or go through every single one here, but just maybe have it read to you here if you want to have it read to you. But just look through these different pages and maybe jot down a few different things in terms of what they are and some of the availability of these things. And you're familiar with several of these already, but go ahead and take a look. We'll just kind of go through these kind of quickly. Instant messaging is another service that's available. That's more of a private thing versus news groups and discussions groups, which they're not completely, some of them can be private, but basically they're open to anybody and everybody can kind of read them versus instant messaging, which is more of an individual. It talks about internet telephony, which that is an example of that is this voice over internet protocol, which you guys use this all the time when you're making a FaceTime call kind of a thing, or when we're doing our collaborate on the classroom, or if you do like a Google Zoom meet or whatever with me. I guess there's not a Google Zoom. It's either Google Meet or Zoom, but you know what I'm talking about. And so it uses this VoIP, which is Voice over Internet Protocol. You should be familiar with the advantages to that. And that is that you don't have a busy line. Voicemails can be received on the computer. You can screen callers, even if the caller has an ID blocked. Users can have calls forwarded from anywhere in the world, and users can direct calls to correct departments and take automated orders. So there are some distinct advantages to using VoIP. It also is a little bit faster than regular internet lines. It's not quite as high a quality, but that's kind of, it's really decent quality. And so it's kind of becoming much more usable. Web applications. There are several different web applications, and I am not going to go through each one of these. We're just going to page through them really fast. You should go back and kind of look at some of the other details. It's kind of self-explanatory, some of it, like tourism and travel is often used, publishing. The thing that is a common theme through a lot of these that I will mention is you need to be careful of, especially in this day and age, of what's real and what's not. Like anybody can publish anything, so always look for the sources on things. Higher education, we use the applications here, the internet, like tons. Right now we're using it. The real estate market uses the internet, and so everybody's got a website. Some of the things that they kind of mention here is like 3D tours. You can take 3D tours now through some of the things with lots of things that are available, and with the high-speed internet. Employment services are available and used quite a bit. Financial institutions use the web, and all of these come with different pros and different cons. A lot of them are positive things, but on the other hand, you have to make sure that you're using a reliable service, because if you're doing anything like financial, you want to make sure that it's secure. Software distribution. You got some of your, like somebody asked in class the other night, is Steam, a software distribution site? Yeah, it is. And again, with, just like with some of the news feeds and stuff, you want to be aware of what you're downloading, because this is sometimes a way that people will put malware and stuff on your devices. So you want to make sure it's from a reputable site if you are using some of those resources. Healthcare is another application. And again, lots of pros and lots of cons to this. It's nice to have everything kind of organized in one place and easily shared, but it also comes at maybe a security risk because somebody could hack into it. And there's also, things that you maybe kind of don't realize is my sister is a retired nurse, and she said when you had paper charts, it was actually sometimes a lot easier just to kind of glance and see maybe some of the history of a patient versus having the electronic charts where you don't get like shown or all of the details, like, because it's all compartmentalized. You have different files and folders, and so you maybe don't get actually the bigger picture as you might when they used to use paper. Politics, and again, especially with some of this new chatbot technology that's come out. For example, we could have somebody do a speech based upon just a few things that Barack Obama had said previously or any previous president, and I could come up with a speech and say, well, this is something that they said, and I could say, in whatever year, it could be totally false. So we always have to watch our sources, and it kind of mentions it here to watch for fake news and fake videos and that kind of stuff. So just be careful of that when you are using the internet. So that's a lot of the applications. That was on got you to page 3 in your notes. And so now we're going to look at something called intranet versus internet. So the big key here on intranets is that an intranet is a network within an organization. So it's kind of on the inside of the organization. It uses the same protocols. So it uses the same protocols as the internet, but it's within an organization. And so, like DMAC has its own intranet, their own network. The P drive is on the DMAC intranet. Nobody else outside of the DMAC network can access or have access to that personal drive. And it's very useful. You have layers of protection that get put into place. And so administrators can allow different people in, and they can also allow different people within the organization only access to certain things. So this is an example of a simple intranet architecture. And so you can, as an administrator, only let certain documents be viewable by certain people. And that's kind of, for example, my human resources documents are only available to my supervisor and the human resources people. Like you guys as students can't view my my HR stuff, etc. And so it allows for layers of protection, and it allows for layers and easily sharing information. Okay. And so intranets are more secure. And so a lot of private companies will use them. And it also allows the local companies to maybe communicate like in one way. Like you can set up your intranet so like everything is kind of uniform within this particular institution. And so it allows for better communication. The internet is public versus the intranet that is private. That's kind of the key difference between the two. There is a chart here that talks through the key features of both. So internet is unlimited, slower, less secure. Intranet has only approved users. The geographic scope is limited. It's faster, and it has more security. And so those are a couple of the things that they might want you to be familiar with. If you struggle with remembering the difference between internet or intranet when you get to maybe on the quiz or whatever, think of it this way, in terms of like, that there's an interstate highway system. So our interstate system is a connection of highways that go outside the states or between or amongst several states. So the interstate spans several different states versus something that would be intrastate would be something that would stay within the state. So our state highways and our county highways don't go outside the state. They're all numbered based upon the state numbering system versus the interstate, which is numbered for, the highway that goes through all the way, east and west or north and south throughout the whole entire United States. So the internet is outside or open to the public. It goes outside the scope. And intranet is within a particular company, or think of it as within a state. So sometimes those two words can get confused, and hopefully that will help you know the difference between the two. You want to look at these pages in a little bit more detail, but different applications of the intranet, that's within a business, is human resources, sales and marketing, production, accounting, and financing. It can help organizations move from a calendar-based system to from a calendar or schedule-based document publishing strategy to one based upon needs or events. This is kind of important because instead of like looking at like everything is due on a particular date or trying to push everything, what it allows people to do is to be more reactive, because if it's based on an event, like if something happens, and I'm thinking of like, when things are like, when software is like pushed out. So like it used to be software was developed on a timeline, and you'd have like a 3-month goal, a 6-month goal, a year goal, etc. And then they would wait until that calendar, scheduled the release date or whatever. Well, now you can actually start to publish or produce or put your software out there in little bitty parts, and people can start to troubleshoot. And so then you are building your software as it, like kind of like building the airplane like you're flying it, but you can build your software as it's getting produced. Okay, I'm not saying the right word. As it's getting pushed out or whatever, you can work on that software, and based upon the feedback that you get, you can be more reactive to what the clients actually need. And it actually has shown that software development is then more responsive to the client's needs in that respect. You do have to have a certain components of it done before you can put it into production. But then it allows for a cycle that's based more on needs than on a specific schedule, and that actually can help, especially in a highly competitive field such as software development. The extranet we've already talked about in terms of the fact that it is more secure, and it talks about that organizations can allow customers and businesses to access their intranet, like we allow some access to the DMAC intranet. For our textbook companies, as an example, whenever I need help with the Cengage textbooks, my Cengage counterparts have access to what we see. But the extranet allows this additional level of security, and that's what this picture kind of represents. Is you have your firewalls, you have people on the outside, and then you have the applications on the local servers and stuff. It's a very small paragraph, but this one's kind of important, and that is the development in web trends. You're going to want to study or take a look at this table. There's Web 1.0, which was static content. So you guys won't remember this at all, but it used to be a web page would be put up and you couldn't change it. It was static. It didn't change, or it wasn't reactive. And basically you had to manually go in and update it versus a dynamic web page, which is Web 2.0, where a dynamic web page, the data will change in real time at potentially. So, for example, if we take a look at Web 2.0 here and look through some of the things here, it's mostly read-write, which means that it can be viewed and it can be changed. You have read-write privileges. It's community focused. There's blogs and wikis. The content is shareable. It allows tagging. There is advertising is cost per click. The advertising mode is interactive. It allows editing of the content, such as Wikipedia. So if somebody edits the Wikipedia, like it is dynamic, meaning like you see it right away when it is changed. Web 3.0 is like an up and coming trend, and Web 3.0 tends to be the more personal perspective. And one thing, I'm going to glance at my notes that I have written down here. Web 3.0, the nickname for it is the semantic web, which kind of focuses on personalization, and it allows us access to tailor our personal goals. And so, for example, that if you wanted to do that Facebook search, that graph search where you wanted to search for friends, pictures of friends that were in San Diego or something like that, that's very personalized. That is an example of Web 3.0. And so we like to have personalized services, and that's where the trend is going. So Web 3.0 is more portable and personal. It's focused more on an individual versus a community. You have live streams. The data is consolidating. The content is not necessarily all shared. Smartphones, smart applications, etc. So take a look at these two this table and these comparisons before you take your quiz. Here's the nickname. The semantic web is what it's called. There's also a trend. Oh, maybe it's not on this page. We'll get to it maybe next. So blogging is more like journaling on the web. These are just some like additional applications. Wikis are a users can, like Wikipedia, users can add and delete and modify the content. And again, you just have to be careful because anybody could put stuff out there. So Wikipedia kind of is self-regulating in the respect that everybody that puts something on Wikipedia has to also reference it. So, and all of you using the internet, I would strongly encourage you to make sure that you are looking at the sources of your information. Social networking is a huge way for some stories to go crazy and get spread on the web, and those stories might not even be correct. My mom, who is 90 years old, has a tendency to believe everything that she sees on the net, and I'll get these emails about, this particular medicine that might be causing a problem, or, don't drink this or don't eat this, or, etc. And it's a warning, and I go and tell, I look it up and I go, Mom, that's all fake. Like it's not real. And so watch out for some of those things. Make sure that you are always verifying your sources. So business applications of social networks. And so we've seen social networks and business applications are really important because a lot of businesses use social networks in order to advertise and get their word out. And so here are some examples of businesses or certain things that could use social networking to improve their businesses. They don't all have to be tied to businesses, but many times they are. And so be aware that that is another application. RSS feeds stands for really simple syndication. They're fast and easy ways to distribute web content. And we did one of our discussions using an RSS feed. And so they are usually kind of more specialized. And as you saw with our discussions, XML is something that they do mention here. XML is extensible markup language, and XML deals with the content versus like HTML, which deals with how a page looks. And so you should be familiar with the fact that HTML is more with defining the data within a context. And so XML deals with the data versus HTML that deals with the look of things. Podcasting is another use or item that's out here on the internet. And so the big thing, you guys are familiar with podcasts. A lot of times you have to subscribe to a podcast, and you subscribe to that podcast through what I would call a third party. That third party is what we call an aggregator. So it says podcasts are usually collected by an aggregator such as iTunes or iPodder, and then you'll subscribe to it, and then you can get your subscriptions from that service. And so that subscription model makes the podcast more useful and popular, and it also increases their accessibility. And so that's kind of why they do some of that. Future trends. So last objective is section 8 here, and we're looking at the Internet of Everything and beyond. And we're also going to be looking at future trends. So the Internet of Everything is basically everything web-based. So it refers to the web development in which people's processes, data, and things are interconnected via the Internet and beyond. So such things as RFID devices, barcodes, wireless systems, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, QR codes, all of that. I was at a concert a week ago, and you could enter to win a trip to Ireland, but you had to like use your phone and get to use the QR code that they listed up on the screen. So be aware that there is the Internet of Everything, which is basically all the data and all the devices. It's everything. There's the Internet of Things. That's the physical objects that are connected to the internet. So think of your Google Voice or your Alexa, your smart lights in your house. If you have a house with smart lights, I don't have a house with smart lights, but or like oh, your cameras on the house. I forget what some of them are called, but you have where it answers, the door, or you can see who is at your door remotely, that kind of a thing. That's the Internet of Things. Some people have refrigerators and it keeps track of what you have run out of, and so it automatically adds it to your grocery list. This image goes back to the Internet of Everything. So Internet of Everything is machines connecting to machines, people connecting to machines, people connecting to people. So you might see these phrases M2M, P2M, P2P, P2P, which is people to people. Internet of Me is the next kind of up and coming thing. And this goes back to the idea of Web 3.0 being the semantic web and trying to become more and more personalized for us. The Internet of Me refers to that subset of personalization that gathers personal information from a given user over the entire internet, including the Internet of Things, and then they start to tailor things. So they're doing personalized web experiences. They're tailoring it to you, and so it's more of a me orientation rather than the whole community. And so an example that they give here is a computer game enthusiast and a police officer search for Grand Theft Auto. So that search engine will come up with two entirely different searches based upon those two different individuals. And so that's part of that. You get the web page where they're tracking cookies and doing things. And so if you choose not to allow them to do some of that tracking, then they won't be able to respond to you in a more personalized manner. And so depending upon your likes or dislikes in terms of that, if you don't want them to track you, you might not get as many personalized things in your inbox or on your web pages, and maybe that's what you want. So a couple of last things here. The benefits of the Internet of Me is that companies will constantly get, this could be also could be a challenge, okay? It says here, the following 3 challenges and recommendations should be considered. I should read the whole paragraph. Companies should constantly gather accurate data about their customers and leverage that data in order to offer products and services. And again, this can come at a risk. And that's why you have to now accept cookies from web pages. It says here that you should consider that companies should create a platform that is seamless so that you don't actually know, so that it's maybe not intrusive. And then in the connected world of IOM, trust is extremely important. I have to trust who's collecting my data. For example, if I decide to let Microsoft use my voice data, Camtasia here is an example. That's what I'm using right now to record this. And I had to allow, if I wanted to, I could allow them to use my voice in order to improve their voice dictation software. And so if it's a trusted source and I want to continue with the research, then that's good. But then maybe they're using my voice to do some of these, internet, artificial intelligence, chatting kinds of things, and that could be used in a bad way. So last but not least is a growing application of IoT is the industrial IoT or IIoT. and that's used to enhance manufacturing and industrial processes. And a few years back, I got to actually tour a plant in Ames, Iowa, and they had a lot of it was automated, and they had robots that ran things, and they were using smart technology, and it increased efficiency. It helped with production. It reduced accidents. It was crazy, everything that they were doing. And that was like 10 years ago that I did that. Smart homes are examples of some of those things, and etc. So look through the book here for some of those specific examples, because they are going to kind of ask you for examples. And so get some of those written down on your note pages and stuff. But that's going to wrap up the lecture for this module. Always read through. If you are short on time, a little trick or hint for studying. If you are short on time, always, read through the summary pages just right before you take the quiz, and maybe, that'll help you remember a few things, rather than maybe reading back through the whole entire thing. Don't forget that you can use this voice dictation thing. There are some options on here, just so you know. I found out, I think if I select, nope. Okay, I was going to try to find there are some settings on this that you guys can set. And I don't remember where I found the settings. But if you play around with this just a little bit, I was able to find some settings so you can play it at a faster speed. So just know that that's possible. I don't know where it was at. Nope, not the help button. There's an example of hypertext popping up by you. All right, that's it. We're going to wrap up this lecture. I hope that helped, especially if you were not in class and didn't go through any of this with us.